Hi, my name is Brenda Seeley, and I am the OSCA Phoenix Talent Chapter Vice President.
And I'm Josie Bolstad, and I'm a senior at Phoenix High School, as long as the 2021 valedictorian of my class.
The past 15 months have been a test of perseverance and persistence for Phoenix Talent Schools in Oregon. Our union members, who are classified staff, worked endlessly planning meetings on how to return staff and students safely to school. Then on September 8th, the day before school started, Mother Nature doubled down. We woke up that morning to low humidity, high heat, and high temperatures. As staff prepared for the first day of school, a fire broke out at about 11 a.m. south of our neighborhoods. Driven by the strong winds, our communities had to evacuate with just minutes of warning.
Right away, many students were displaced, and 30% of our 2,500 students were permanently displaced. Many did not have many belongings because they did not have much time to grab what they needed, and so they had what was on their backs. Since the pandemic was still raging, there was not many resources for people to go and stay. And so in that moment, we needed to pull together. And so with the help of union members, teachers, school board members, and students, we applied for the COVID response grant from the AFT Innovation Fund. And when it came to composing the proposal, I listened to people on social media when they were talking about their feelings. I listened to the teachers that I was also evacuated with, and took all their suggestions and put together the final piece.
The goal of our proposal was to provide our community with assistance during COVID. Many of our families are low income, and COVID was taking a toll on them. Their ability to work and support their children during online learning was very difficult. But because of the fires, many of our families were scattered throughout the valley and even throughout the country. We provided backpacks to our law enforcement officers. Those backpacks contained activity books, crayons, a stuffed animal, a book, masks, hand sanitizer, and COVID learning packets.
Along with those backpacks, which were incredibly cute, by the way, great patterns, we also used funds to support providing local produce by Rogue Valley Farm to School. And they would come with boxes with a whole bunch of varieties of fruits and vegetables, so families could eat well and stay healthy even through tragic times.
We also donated funds to our Transition Learning Center. These funds help the students learn not only life skills, but coping skills for COVID. During the Classified Appreciation Week, we made nice packets for our union members with reusable masks. They had hand sanitizers, nice T-shirts with the school logos and the union logos on them, and our staff members were thrilled to get those.
We also used funds to help Jackson County Parks clean up and rebuild the greenway destroyed in the fire.
Our union, like so many others during this pandemic, came together to overcome tragedy and rebuild. And even though we faced an awful fire, we once again showed that how we are stronger together.
Something that I took away from this is kids are resilient. Kids really, they just wow me. Like, I was stressing out at home and everything, but the kids, they were like, okay, let's get this done.
Be prepared for the unexpected is the lesson we all had to learn. We need to serve the kids of this district and what's going on here emotionally and socially as well as educationally. That's the big takeaway piece, making kids feel secure in what they're learning and safe in this environment.
The need for science of integrating it into our curriculum to talk about these things. In my classes, we talked about COVID, we talked about what's the genetic material, we talked about the vaccines, and having these real-life application lessons where students are able to really interact. We don't want to be in a lecture, we want to be in a student-centered learning. That's something that was re-emphasized for me being in this pandemic.
Kids have really suffered this year since the pandemic, and we really need to value their input, their opinion. The tests will always take care of themselves. I just believe as an educator, you have to always be mindful of how your kids are feeling.
Early on in the pandemic, as an English teacher, I had asked the kids to keep a COVID journal 3 times a week, just to sit and do a digital journal entry and just record what was happening in their lives. So whether that was in their immediate family, in their community, or nationally. So just watching those digital journals sort of evolve in light of the new protests and Black Lives Matter movement, and coupled with the pandemic. One student in particular, there was a poetry activity, and she had written that her father was sick, and she wrote this beautiful poem the weekend he had passed away. It was due to complications from COVID. And these are the types of things we're dealing with as teachers.
Communication with our students. They've been amazing with rolling with all of the changes. I tell my students all the time that they're rock stars, and that is important to kind of acknowledge them and all the changes that they've gone through, but it's definitely working as a team.
Good morning, everyone. I am Evelyn DeJesus, and it is my privilege to serve as the Executive Vice President of this great union, the American Federation of Teachers. It is also my great pleasure to welcome you to this final day of Teach 2021. What a week we've had together. This morning, we're going to spend some time on the bedrock, the deepest foundation for what we do as educators. I'm talking about literacy, because literacy underlies everything else that we do. The AFT has been all in on literacy for the past 2 decades. As Randy reminded us in her opening speech, over 20 years ago, AFTs first identified the need for educators, whatever the subject or level, to know more about research-based literacy. We shared the research, trained thousands of teachers, and a little publication called Teaching Reading is Rocket Science became a staple of reading programs across the country. But we now know a whole lot more about how students learn to read because the science has advanced in the last 20 years. What hasn't changed is that supporting literacy starts with our teachers. And it starts with understanding that even before the pandemic, under-resourced schools struggled to provide high-quality reading instruction. During the pandemic, we saw students who had been already marginalized suffering the most. We cannot let that happen with literacy. In our new campaign, Launching Literacy, we will support our members to enhance their credentials and improve their instructional skills in literacy. We'll begin with a member survey to help us understand not only what you feel you know about teacher reading and literacy, but what help you need to support struggling readers to engage with their families and communities and to ensure their partnership in a common effort. We already know some of what that survey is going to confirm because we hear it all the time, that lots of teachers are going to say, I was never really taught how to teach reading. My own preparation didn't prepare me to be a reading teacher. That, my union family, is going to change. We will feature a series of back-to-school webinars, an online hub of updated resources, and much, much more. Stay tuned. It's going to be a fabulous campaign. And here's what I want you to remember as the campaign launches. And as you get ready to go back to school in August, every educator is a reading teacher. Every single one of us. Now, my friends, I'd like to turn it over to my fellow officer, my brother, Fedrick Ingram, Secretary-Treasurer of the AFT, who will introduce a very, very special guest for the closing session.
Thank you, Evelyn. We're joined today with our special guest, Deputy Secretary of the Department of Education, Cindy Marten. As Randy often says, elections matter. Thanks to the election of President Biden and Vice President Harris, we now have a Department of Education with leaders like Secretary Cardona and Deputy Secretary Cindy Marten, who truly understand how public schools operate because they have worked in them for years. Deputy Secretary Marten has more than 30 years of educational experience. For 10 years, Deputy Secretary Marten worked in one of San Diego's most ethnically diverse and economically challenged school communities at Central Elementary School in City Heights. As a teacher, instructional leader, and later as a principal, she established a commitment to educating the whole child through an emphasis on social and emotional learning and the arts, combined with academic rigor. She then served as the superintendent of the San Diego Unified School District since 2013. As superintendent, Ms. Marten directed implementation of the district's Vision 2020 commitment to a meaningful graduation for all students. Under her leadership, the district achieved the highest graduation rate among big city districts in California and the fastest reading growth of large urban school districts in the nation. In addition to her emphasis on academics, Marten has been a champion for health and wellness, putting in place an award-winning wellness policy for staff and students. We can all use that. Thank you for joining us today. Deputy Secretary Marten, how are you?
I'm doing well. It's so good to see both of you, and thank you so much for having me here and being with teachers. As you said in the introduction, I'm a lifelong educator, teacher at heart, and spent many years as a classroom teacher. And thanks for that wonderful introduction. It's wonderful to join both of you this morning.
Well, thank you so much, and we are honored to have you today. So listen, Deputy Secretary Marten, we'd love to ask you some questions, and Evelyn and I will take turns. So let me start off, because we want to jump right in. Your background is in education. You came up as a teacher and instructional leader before you took on administrative roles at the school, then the district, and now the national level. How does your strong background as an educator inform your role as a policymaker and your views on policy?
Thank you so much. And we'll just get this out of the way out front. Please call me Cindy. Deputy Secretary is a mouthful. Happy to have you call me Cindy. And talking about my background and how does this prepare me for this, as you mentioned in my introduction, as the last 8 years as superintendent, I was able to work with a lot of state leaders and superintendents and principals. And we know those critical stakeholders who are really at the forefront of reopening equitably, and they play a significant role in what happens and what success looks like in that effort for our students' experiences to be successful. So I've been in their shoes. I've sit across the table from them. I sit alongside them, and I'm eager to continue to build those kinds of strong partnerships for our students. But what's at the heart of it is who I am at my core is I'm a teacher. When I get on a plane and travel over to DC and people say, oh, what do you do? Just general conversation. I don't say I'm Deputy Secretary of Education. I didn't say I was superintendent. When I was principal, I didn't say I was a principal. I'm a teacher because that's how I identify myself. I'm a teacher, and I bring the experience and the frame and the commitment of being a teacher with me wherever I go, no matter what my title is. I always say the title on our business card is just something on a piece of paper. It's the work that matters. And I might be doing my work in a different city now, and I might have a different office, and there might be a different platform, a different stage, and new people and relationships I'll get to meet, but the work is the same. And we start every policy discussion in my office with the work that I do with how will this help children? How will educators have what they need to give students what they need when they need it in the way that they need it? That's where good policy is always built from.
Thank you for that.
Hi, Cindy. Great seeing you again.
You too.
As you heard a few minutes ago, literacy is near and dear to my heart as it is to yours. And you yourself were a literacy specialist. How do we ensure every student is reading at grade level?
Yes, you and I are like soul sisters on this. Literacy is at the core of what we believe in. I actually pulled some things out this morning just so you would see. I still have samples of student writing of children that I taught, because teaching literacy is at the heart of what we do. I'm a lifelong literacy educator. And how do we do this? We have to remember that literacy is at the cornerstone of success for students, not just in school, but in life. And we have to remember that when we talk about literacy, we have to widely define literacy. Mm-hmm. Literacy isn't just reading and writing and decoding and encoding words on a page. I love talking to teacher audiences because you all know what I'm saying when I say decode and encode, but it's more than that. It's mathematical literacy, science literacy, social emotional literacy, being able to make meaning of the world around you by creating richly literate environments and richly literate lives, and understanding the multiple literacies that our children bring into the classrooms with them. When they come to school, they have literacies, whether they bring biliteracy backgrounds and languages from homes, but literacy in their experiences, and honoring that kind of literacy. So I love the campaign you just talked about this morning, Evelyn. I know that when we ensure that every student is reading at grade level, by making sure that teachers are properly prepared, trained, and supported to teach reading, it makes a difference. I'm a literacy specialist. That's my background. I know what it takes. And I'm so happy to hear that you want to have a campaign and support that comes with that, because students learning to read is so important. They should have opportunities to read every single day. Mm-hmm. Students should have access to high quality books in the classrooms, reading materials that are appropriate, not just for their reading level, but for their interest level and for their backgrounds, and books that mirror things that matter to them. Absolutely. So richly literate environments with richly trained teachers that know how to meet students where they are. So important. That's what good literacy teachers know how to do. They know what a student needs in order to grow in their literate lives. So being able to ensure that our approach isn't based on correcting reading problems necessarily, but rather immersing students in high quality literacy and literate environments and honoring the multiple literacies that they bring in. Evelyn, you and I could do like a whole day on this because we know how much it matters. We know what works when it comes to literacy. I've never met a student that we don't know how to help become a reader on grade level. It's a matter of having the skills, the supports, the resources, and the training to do it. We can do it, and we just need teachers to have the right supports for that.
That's fantastic, and a breath of fresh air for all of our members around the country. So thank you for that answer. Cindy, to shift a little bit, this has been a very long and hard 16 months for our schools and our country. Now, with the vaccines and the American Rescue Plan, we're seeing a light at the end of the tunnel, and AFT is all in person learning this fall. But our union is really concerned that millions of students may not return this fall. That this past year was so tough, they are finding it hard to get themselves back to school. How do we help students and families and communities make sure all our kids are in school?
Fed, I like that you just said that this has been hard. So start with that. Nobody's going to deny that it's been hard, and no one can define what hard means for each individual educator and student and their family and the leaders that have been leading. It's been hard. People say that, you know, we're all in this together. We're all in the same boat. I don't know that we're all in the same boat. I know that we were all in the same storm, but people were in different boats during this. And we have to honor what has happened and where have we grown, where have we been hurt, and what does healing look like? And so what I can say is that we need to be, and we are committed to providing the resources that will ensure that every school can offer 5-day in-person instruction this fall to start. And you know the American Rescue Plan includes nearly $130 billion to safely reopen our schools for in-person instruction. That's important. These resources will help to pay for schools and districts to be able to implement mitigation strategies, hire more staff, accommodate the need for smaller classes when necessary, support students' social, emotional, mental health, academic needs moving forward. Resources are there for those things that we know matter, but we don't want to pretend like we know what everybody needs, but there's resources. And that's what the American Rescue Plan can do. The funds can be used to develop strategies that implement public health protocols that will include policies that are in line with the guidance with the CDC and all the guidance that we have on reopening and opening schools to effectively maintain health and safety of students. Health and safety is important, safety for our students, for our educators and other staff. And then also remember the American Rescue Plan has committed $10 billion in screening testing for schools. We know how important that is. So I think it's particularly important because even as we are heartened by the trend of schools reopening and parents re-enrolling their children for in-person learning, we know that our most recent school survey on reopening shows that Asian, Black, Latinx students, unfortunately, are less likely than their peers to return to in-person instruction. So we need to understand why this is, get underneath that, get to the heart of it, and begin with extensive, and you know this so well as educators, sustained outreach, creating opportunities to listen to families, start where they are and understand if they're hesitating, why? What's standing in the way? We want our families to know that we want them at school with us. When we talk about family and community engagement, there's a little nuance to it in the conversation. And we have to ensure that every student gets what they need, when they need it, in the way that they need it. And that only happens with deep and authentic listening. And those are the things that we have to lean into. And we lean into that in the way that teachers do best. It's with partnerships with our families. We're not designing at local schools grand plans for children, doing it to them or for them. We do it with our community. And the only way to get to 100% in person and sustain it post reopening is to build and continue to build trust by listening and by being responsive. And that's what teachers do best. Teachers know how to do this.
Yeah.
Great. I love what you said is we may not have all been together, but we were all part of the storm. So now we're getting out of that storm. And once we're out of the storm, you know, storm brings consequences and pain and all that. So how do we have everyone back in school buildings? How do we help all the students that are coming out of the storms, the communities that are coming out of the storms, coming back to grow and to thrive? How do we support them? How do we build trust, as you said? And how do we build back better?
Love this question. We are all about build back better, and we know our president's about that. And you ask it like a true teacher. Teachers always ask, how do we grow and how do we thrive? That's what we want. What lights up a teacher is seeing their students grow and thrive, and doing it in this context makes it more complex than it's ever been before. So let's look at what we've learned over the last year. What we've learned is that we need to work together. Maybe we already knew that, but boy, we've seen how important it is. And working together, it ensures that everyone who needs to be at the table to support our students to be successful is at the table. And that has to include our parents and our caregivers. That's where trust happens. You build back better when you do it together. And one of the biggest lessons we've learned in the last year, in my opinion, I mean, there's been a lot, and is that we knew, but that we didn't necessarily have the tools or solutions before COVID, is that there has to be intentional relationship building. We always knew relationship building mattered. How do you do it intentionally? So what we see is schools, districts, unions, teachers, families have come to the table with this big shared willingness and drive to show up and be vulnerable and to understand where there's issues of trust and talk about it, and to acknowledge that different students have experienced the pandemic differently, and to say that and be able to discuss it and do something about it, and that they're going to experience reopening differently. We have to know that it'll be different for everybody, and that we have to adjust to ensure that each student and their family is supported in an effective way. What's going to be meaningful to them? Will they feel that they're returning to a safe and inclusive learning environment? And if they're not, why not? And what can we do to change that? So while we know that there are students who have experienced learning loss, we also know that we have to be creative about how are we going to capitalize on what's been gained during this time. Everyone wants to talk about what's been lost. I know children have gained things as well. And I know their teachers that though through their home visits and through the virtual meetings that they've been having, they've met parents and caregivers that they may have never met before. When I was a principal at the inner city school that you mentioned, we started out with very small family Fridays, and towards the end of my principalship, we would have 200 or 300 families coming. And there were families that we didn't know at the beginning, but when they started coming, well, I know that during this pandemic, we met families and caregivers that maybe never crossed that bridge to school. And whatever is hesitant to make people come to school, it takes that relationship building. And so how do we build on the progress and the intentional relationships that have been built during this time? Because that's how we continue. This is such an opportunity. We've been in our families' homes. We've been able to get to know each other on different levels than we ever have before. So I think we have these creative new tactics that were built out of necessity, and we've all gotten proficient. Look at us now. We're having this conversation. We can't lose that progress. And what's underneath that progress is trust and relationships.
Thank you so much, Cindy. I totally agree with you. So let's talk about a topic that's dear and near to both our hearts, and we've talked about special education, differently able students, and teaching multilingual learners, as many of you call English language learners, are also two issues very close to both our hearts. Knowing that we have to differentiate supports to ensure equity, how do we differentiate funding to enable that? I know you worked on this as a superintendent, and I believe you called it an equity-focused funding model.
Yes. Yes, we sure did. And it actually was in alignment with when I was appointed superintendent. My first day as superintendent, July 1st, 2013, which, by the way, was never anything I thought I was going to do. Like I said, I'm a teacher at heart, but July 1st, 2013, when I became superintendent, is when our governor in California actually passed the local control funding formula. In California, it's known as the LCFF, and it's an equity fund. It's an equity-driven funding model that at its core means where there's greater need, there needs to be greater investment. And as a lifelong educator, I could not agree with that approach more. So in the local control funding formula, what's underneath it is there needs to be a local control accountability plan. And so that's the work that I've been leading in San Diego Unified, along with our board and a great leadership team in our district and fabulous teachers. We were able to develop our local control accountability plan. And the idea is that the state would give districts more flexibility with their funds, but with more flexibility came more accountability. And the accountability was to our communities, to our children, and to outcomes. So there's funding, and what are the programs, actions, and services tied to that funding that prioritizes equity? Where there's greater need, there's greater investment. So I'll say what we learned from this model, an equity-based funding model, is that if you focus on equity and you put your resources on the communities with the most significant needs, for example, right now, those most impacted by the pandemic, if you do that and you give districts flexibility to spend the funds on what makes the most sense for them, for their community, for their children, then they will put the money into programs, actions, services that lift up student performance and attracts and retains great teachers. It works. And the American Rescue Plan does just that. It asks the LEAs, the districts, and the states to do some of this equity-focused thinking as they're working towards their own reopening at the local level. It's through the ARP's requirements around stakeholder engagement, maintenance of effort, and maintenance of equity, and the flexibility of the law to apply solutions to what students need the most on the local level. It gives us a great national opportunity for partnership between schools. This is local. At the national level, it's what we're saying, but at the local level, it's this opportunity for partnership between the schools and the communities to build the solutions that they need. And inside it, accountability is built right in. So it's almost as if the last 8 years as superintendent, we've been doing this equity-focused funding model. And now you can see it's built right. You can see the American Rescue Plan is asking districts that really important community engagement matters.
Wow, that's fantastic and refreshing. We need an hour just to talk about the equity focus model. Thank you very much for that. And so continuing that thread of making sure schools and students have what they need to be successful, how do we ensure that teaching is sustainable, an attractive profession, and that our schools are filled with the school nurses, counselors, social workers, and the other essential certified staff that are needed to serve our students and communities?
I love this question. I love all your questions. Thank you. Key word is sustainable. I always say any effort that I did as superintendent needs to be sustainable, scalable, replicable, systemic, systematic, and equitable. And putting sustainable efforts in place that will attract professions into the we're all teachers talking here. Like, we have to do the campaign and say, come on, teachers, teaching is the greatest career in the whole country. We have to respect that the teaching profession for what it is. We know it is the foundation of all other opportunities. We must lift our profession. This is for us to do. We can do that by making sure our educators have a decent salary. Teachers have a full-time job already, and they have to be properly compensated so they don't have to find part-time work to make ends meet. That should never happen. In 30 states, mid-career teachers who had a family of 4 or more for themselves qualify for federal assistance programs, such as free and reduced price lunch. That is not paying teachers as the skilled professionals that we know they are. Educators must have the opportunity to have quality professional development throughout the school year. I know how professional development matters to teachers. It matters to them for their own growth and development, And it matters because they see with their learning, their children learn. And nothing matters more to a teacher than to see their child learn. It's the spark and the magic of learning, and high quality, ongoing, sustained professional development is the kind of investment that matters for the workforce that you're talking about. And with more than half of our nation's students identifying as non-white, I have to say, I'd be wrong if I didn't mention that we need more teachers of color leading our classrooms. And I actually need your help to make that happen. While it's important for all of our teachers to create culturally, linguistically inclusive classrooms, we also know that it's our teachers of color serve as important role models while they set high expectations, provide culturally relevant learning opportunities, and then become important advocates, members of the community. And it's not just students of colors who benefit. All students benefit from having diverse educators. I've seen it, I know it, I've experienced it, and I've heard testimony from students that say that. We know that regardless of race, teachers of color help students feel connected, cared for, and academically challenged. And I'll say again, the American Rescue Plan can help localities meet these needs and uplift the teaching profession in the immediate term. And the American Families Plan will help us sustain this investment, this work.
Wow, Deputy Secretary Marten, let me tell you something. What you just said is not only refreshing and not only delightful, but it is important. And I know that our members heard that diversity is important, that is the key to raising all of us and all of our students and all of our schools to where we need to be. And so thank you for that answer. And so as we come to a close, I have one last question, and you hit on it a little bit, but I'm going to broaden it out just a little bit. And this is a big one. Long term, how are you thinking the department should be working to make sure that public education as an institution remains the cornerstone of our democracy?
Thank you for that question. It's all I think about, morning, noon, and night. I'm not even sleeping anymore because there's so much. How am I thinking about what the department's going to do the thing I care and love the most in this world? Is that education is the cornerstone of our democracy. It is what drives my every move, my every breath, my every word, my every action. And what I can start with is the short-term priority for me is the same for the secretary and for the president. It's very clear. 100% of schools will offer 5-day in-person instruction to all students. We have to start with that. Schools are the cornerstone of our democracy. That's where we're going to begin. And then as we move forward, we're going to be focused on establishing a new baseline for all of our students, because everything we've learned sets things on a whole different level. Let's start with the new baseline where we're going to provide every child and family with access to affordable early childhood education. We're going to ensure every student, no matter their background, their zip code, their circumstance, gets high quality education. That is going to include students with disabilities, multilingual learners, and any student with special needs. Your demography should not determine your destiny, and high quality educators are the key to that. Reimagining college and career pathways, and then making higher education more accessible and more affordable. These are cornerstone democracy things that happen. And then respecting the teaching profession and diversify the teaching workforce we just mentioned, as you said, and then healing and learning and growing together. Secretary Cardona and I talk about heal, learn, and grow together. That's what we can do going forward. And then we'll think creatively so we can invest in the innovations that have emerged during this pandemic. There are innovations in our classrooms and our communities that as we heal, learn, and grow together, we can invest in those and make them permanent. If we've closed a digital divide in a neighborhood and a school district had figured out how to do that, don't let it open again. When we heal, learn, and grow together, and we take these innovations, that happens. And the president has been so clear. He's proposed historic investment in the whole educational experience. The American Families Plan is a once-in-a-generation investment, and it's in the foundation of middle-class prosperity. Education, healthcare, childcare, and all the basic needs that you're addressing in this question are built right into the American Families Plan. It proposes transformational investments in education that will help our communities recover from this pandemic. It will help us rebuild, and it will help communities provide every student the opportunity to succeed in the global economy that they'll be participants in. The American Families Plan is adding 4 years of free public education for every student, universal high-quality preschool to all 3- and 4-year-olds, and 2 years of free community college to all Americans. It's addressing teacher shortages, improving teacher preparation, helping teachers earn credentials and certifications in high-demand areas, and it also strengthens the pipeline of retention of the diverse educator workforce that I spoke about earlier. The president has boldly proposed this American Families Plan, and he's done it to build on the recovery efforts, and it's going to allow us to reinvigorate education so we can support our families now and for the next generation. This isn't a short-term do it now, build back better, check it off and go back. It is generational investment. This is historic. These historic investments in education are meant to address these issues. Don't forget, including investing an additional $20 billion in Title I to support schools and students with the greatest needs. This is historic. The American Families Plan needs your support so that our recovery efforts aren't just right now, short term, it's the long term. We need your support. So these are just the beginning of prosperity for our children and for our future generations.
Wow, that's all I have to say. Wow. Talking our language, Deputy Secretary Marten, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us about your vision for public education. As we all head back to school in the fall, it's been a pleasure to have engaged in this conversation with you. We look forward, hand in hand, to work with you and Secretary Cardona. Leadership matters. It's very refreshing, to say the least, to have someone in the U.S. Department of Education who understands what students and educators need. And the fact that our members went absolutely all in on the 2020 election means that we can be here today having these kinds of discussions, and we share your vision. It means that there are billions of dollars flowing to school districts to address the horrible inequities exposed and highlighted by this pandemic. And it means that for the first time in years, I'm very excited, we have the freedom to truly reimagine public schools. And Fed, my brother, thank you always for bringing your unique insights and energy to every conversation you are part of. Thank you. And now I would like to turn it over to Fed.
Thank you. And thank you, Evelyn. Thank you, Deputy Secretary Cindy Marten. We appreciate having you. It was a pleasure talking about education, talking about what we do every day in our plan to return, to recover, and reimagine our public schools and help to usher in what we're calling a renaissance of public education for all. I want to close our time together at Teach on a topic that's important to me, and it's important to many of you: arts education. As a music teacher and a band director for 10 years, arts education holds a special place in my heart. Arts education doesn't just create successful students. It helps create successful human beings. In fact, it saved lives. It saved my life. Students who learn how to play a musical instrument are also building their cognitive and memory skills. Participating in theater or choir builds students' self-confidence in public speaking. Learning how to create art helps students with problem solving. So because arts education is so near and dear to me, I am particularly proud that the AFT is presenting the 2021 AFT Making a Difference Award. This award goes to Stephen Benzant and teachrock.org, which is the organization that he launched. From social studies and language arts to media studies, science and more, Teach Rock has been engaging material using popular music to help educators teach across the disciplines. You can find these free lesson plans and resources on sharemylesson.com, which is still the biggest resource in the country for lesson plans at aft.org. After Stephen's video, we are going to see and hear from the White Plains Middle School Jazz Ensemble. Like so many of these bands across the country, and marching band is right around the corner, and I cannot wait. It is made up of students who are just learning how to play the drums or the saxophone and are still mastering reading music. Their willingness to learn and to be a part of something instills a growth mindset that will have them succeed and thrive. Just like our students, educators must continue to learn and to grow. And that's what we've been doing here at Teach. Before we turn to these videos, I want to say thank you. Thank you all for being a part of the 2021 AFT Teach Conference. Listen, I want to leave you with the words of Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune. In her finest hour, she said, I leave you love, I leave you hope, and I leave you a thirst for education, that our students must never lose their zeal for building a better world. We'll see you in school. Take care, everybody.
You may know him as a founding member and guitarist for a certain New Jersey rock band, the E Street Band. You may also know that he's a singer, songwriter, and producer for his own group, the Disciples of Soul, as well as for many others. You may also know him as an actor because he often plays a gangster. But what you may not know is that Steven Van Zandt is an activist, and he has devoted much of his time in recent years appreciating in a very public way the hard and important work of teachers and promoting our profession. Steven Van Zandt passionately spreads the gospel of teachers and music and arts education. At his concerts, before the pandemic, he invited teachers to his concerts for free. He refers to the amazing work that teachers do on his Sirius XM radio show. He's walked picket lines with teachers like he did with the UTLA folks in the strike that they had a couple of years ago. Steven Van Zandt walks the walk of our profession and lifts us all up. And then, of course, there is his incredible music and arts curriculum platform, which is called Teach Rock. There's a wide variety of lessons which are aligned to standards and use the history of popular music and culture to help engage our students. And by the way, our own Share My Lesson carries the Teach Rock curriculum. I highly recommend it, and you can get it for free. During the pandemic, parents had a front seat into the amazing work of teachers. How you showed up, turned on a dime, worked hard, maybe harder than you've ever worked, in very, very uncertain and scary times to support your students. Steven knew that long before the pandemic, that was true. And he speaks truth to power about who you are, who our members are, who teachers are, whenever and wherever he can. And he wants to visit one of your classrooms this fall. This year, Steven launched Little Steven's Virtual Classroom Tour, in which he selects classrooms where he then talks about music and the arts. This spring, Steven visited 15 classrooms, speaking with K-12 students nationwide for hours upon hours. If you want a chance for Steven to visit your classroom, he asks that you submit a 60-second video on Flipgrid saying who you are, what you teach, and why you'd like Steven to visit your classroom. So, for his passion and for his phenomenal efforts, on behalf of teaching, teachers, and the teaching profession, it's my honor and pleasure to present Steven Van Zandt with the AFT's Making a Difference Award. Thank you, Steven.
Hello, AFT teachers. This is an amazing award coming from my favorite people, you. You, my friends, are the ones that make a difference every single day. I cannot thank you and the American Federation of Teachers enough for honoring me with this award. To Randy Weingarten and Fed Ingram and Evelyn DeJesus, thank you from the bottom of my heart, and for the opportunity to speak with so many teachers at one time. You know, I believe that teaching music, arts, and culture is as important as math and science. I believe that the A in STEAM education is essential. The arts reflect the times. The arts give each student a personal entryway to learning. And the arts are how we teach in the present tense and engage a generation who has the answer to everything in their pocket and real-life skills learning. Remember when we were kids and wanted to use calculators on our math tests, and the teachers would say, "You won't have a calculator in your pocket." Later on, well, they were wrong. These kids do have a calculator, a compass, a GPS system, and everything else Radio Shack used to sell us in the palms of their hands at all times. We can't tell them, learn this now and someday you will use it. We need to teach them right now and reach them and engage them in the types of critical thinking that will serve them forever. Let's keep in mind that kids come to us with certain gifts already intact. They come with imagination, with emotions, with instincts, with curiosity. Instead of suppressing or trying to replace those gifts, we need to honor and encourage them. That's what the arts do. There are no wrong answers in the arts. Every kid is not naturally comfortable with the precision required for the basic STEM disciplines. The arts provide a comfort zone, and that comfort zone will extend to the other disciplines. I believe we need to go first where the students are most safe, that common ground where they're not threatened. Once we're on that common ground, then teachers can do their thing. Teachers can teach. I launched Teach Rock because I believe music will empower teachers to engage the students. We all know that students who are engaged, even if it's just one class or one teacher, are more likely to keep coming back. The Teach Rock curriculum is there to help teachers create the class that keeps those kids coming back. We have a curriculum for every grade, pre-K through AP history. We have interdisciplinary materials that say match music with history or math, lessons for every genre of music you can imagine, suggested activities for project-based learning, and so much more. Visit us at teachrock.org or on your Share My Lesson platform. It's free either way. But Teach Rock is nothing without you. Teachers are essential workers. Teachers are the front line in the war against ignorance. And honestly, we have never needed you more. You make a difference, and we thank you for it. And as Randy said, I've had a blast visiting one K-12 classroom each week in 2021. I saw how skilled teachers are using Teach Rock to keep kids focused and engaged in such a crazy time. I also got to help out where I could, answering questions from the students. It's a lot of fun. I can't overstate my appreciation for all that you teachers do and for this award. My Teach Rock staff and I can only make a difference because you work with students every single day. I salute you. You are helping create the next generation of engineers, scientists, doctors, nurses, artists, activists, writers, and even musicians. Thank you again.
Jazz band is playing for the 8th grade Moving Up Day ceremony, which, because of the pandemic, for the first time ever, it's being held on the high school's football field.
Rising up, back on the street, to my time, to my chances. We have practiced so much for this day. I think that we were all looking forward to it. To participate in jazz band makes me super happy. Music has been a part of my life. I think that everyone has a thing that they do to loosen themselves or express themselves with, and that is what music is to me.
It was a good experience for me because I tried out like different instruments from the percussion area.
Mr. Tim Veeder, he has, been doing the Zoom meetings and making sure that we all feel included.
When they play more difficult pieces that I can usually help them with, I wasn't able to remotely. My first strategy was pick some songs that they'd be able to find success quickly with.
Playing and choosing different songs that we could play, like, for example, Eye of the Tiger.
It would be easy to throw your hands up and say no art. But I think one of the things the pandemic has proven with society as a whole is how important the arts are to just as human beings.
Our teachers have been so understanding, and they've helped us. They've went on this new journey with us, and I think together we created a new norm of education.
It's so vitally important to give the kids this celebration and the opportunity to be in person and to get together. The kids went through so much.
I am very, very happy and grateful for our community for being able to make this graduation the best they could in this hard time.
It felt like an honor that we could play 2 pieces at the graduation. I feel honored to be in the jazz band and represent the middle school.